Welcome, writers. I am so excited to have this conversation with Sandra Postma today. Sandra's our guest. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for having me.
And I think Sandra's got a lot of valuable insight here to offer our writers. And before we dig into it, let me just introduce you to the writers a little bit more through your bio. So Sandra is a former journalist who switched from fact to fiction after discovering her own stories held the power for change. Now a speculative fiction writer and certified book coach, Sandra founded Your Story Mentor in 2021. In her business as a mindset and story coach, Sandra helps sci-fi and fantasy writers find their voice and helps them develop their story ideas into novels with a specific interest in helping those with chronic illnesses. As a woman with multiple chronic illnesses herself, amongst them ME/CFS, Graves' disease, and chronic migraines, she knows what it is like to feel invisible to society and misunderstood by many. Making her writers feel seen and making them realize how important their individual voices and stories are has become her main goal in her work. She is particularly committed to creating a safe space and community for writers with an illness or disability to come together and find their voice to write and thrive. So, writers, Sandra is here this morning to help us dig into some of these issues that pop up in her work, working with writers with chronic illness, but then also since she is a writer with a chronic illness herself. So Sandra, I just thank you so much for having this conversation with us and for being willing to be open and transparent with our writers.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's my thing.
So given that we know that you work with writers with chronic illnesses, perhaps we should open things up first by talking about why it's important to address writers with chronic illness, like as a thing. What types of challenges would a writer with a chronic illness face that perhaps one who does not have that obstacle, like what extra things are we talking about that this writer might need to deal with?
Yeah, these are all things that I experienced myself. And then I looked around and saw many different people do the same thing. So I thought, oh, hey, this is something that more people could use some help with. For me, it started really with that idea of having to write every day and just not being able to.
Yeah.
And trying to create a writing habit and not being able to, because I could wake up and be like, okay, I'm gonna write today, and then my body saying, no, you're not gonna be writing today. And just that frustration and the sadness and the anger takes over everything. And yeah, it really, really influenced my own writing journey, because at a certain point I thought, I can't be a writer because I can't do these things that I'm expected to do as a writer. And it could even be from sitting behind a desk writing, which I can't do for many hours of the day. Sometimes I can't even do it at all. So it really came from those practical things that I felt that frustration in my own life. And then when I became a book coach, I started to talk about these things with certain people, and they were like, oh, I actually feel that as well. And I don't call myself a writer because I can't do any of these things that I'm supposed to do. And yeah, that really got kind of lit the fire beneath my and yeah, and I just really started to dig into that. Like, what is that feeling that we need to do certain things? And yeah, it just started to really kind of take off, in a sense that that feeling of not being able to do the writing itself, it has such an impact on your your identity as a writer, that you really want to write and then you can't, and it's so frustrating. And it has the physical symptoms along with that as well, which is a whole thing in itself. The pain, the mental pain as well. And I mean, those are just a few examples. It can kind of there's quite a long list of things that that influence it every day. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even without a chronic illness being part of the picture, being in any creative field, being in writing, we know that like the mindset and the like that that seems to be half of the battle
Yeah,
sometimes. And then when you
absolutely.
add these extra layers, I can certainly see how that would be frustrating and at times debilitating. And yeah, so it's beautiful that you help people identify these things, but I'm guessing that you don't just help them identify them, but perhaps try to help them work through them. So
Yeah.
do you find in your work that you are spending as much time working with the writer in addition to perhaps working on their actual writing? Do you find that
Mm.
you're spending a lot of time, working with the writer's like emotional being and things like that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not even directly. So I can have calls with people and it really is just about their story. But at the beginning I asked them how they are. And I kind of set this up like, how do you feel today? Are you able to do this session? Like, are you able to do this physically, mentally? How are you feeling? How's the past week been physically? And so in those first minutes, it really comes up how they've been feeling and the frustration that comes along with it. And then we just spend the rest of the hour just talking about their story.
Yeah.
But it can always really help them, in between our sessions, just to kind of know it's okay if I can't write today. So it kind of creates this undercurrent, I guess, of this mental mindset thing. And you're right, it's not just people with chronic illness,
Yeah.
it's like, mums as well. Like,
Yeah.
there's so much pressure in society anyway, and I focus on people with chronic illness, but it's a general thing that's happening. And yeah, I kind of use, and this is why I always say, like I'm a book and mindset coach because they just go hand in hand for
Yeah.
me. um and that's the kind of people that I work with who are open to that. But yeah, no, I definitely also focus on the story, which often doesn't even have anything to do with illness.
Right, right. So you had mentioned perhaps not even knowing if I mean everybody's going to have a life curveball thrown at them every now and then that will prevent them from going about what they had planned for the day. I mean
Yeah.
that is life. But perhaps for someone with a chronic illness, this might occur more frequently than it
Yeah.
might in the general population. So I how do you recommend writers proceed when, and maybe their average day status is to just be very tired or like you mentioned, headaches or things like that that would really impede writing and certainly aren't ideal, but
Mm-hmm.
perhaps writers can help learn to manage those things a little bit so that they can still progress towards their goals. How do you recommend writers handle those challenges?
I think there's two different things about that. The first is that when a non-ill person, just to put it like that, is like not feeling well in the day, they can still kind of do something because they know that they can sleep it off and they'll be fine. If someone with a chronic illness does that, it'll end badly. It'll exacerbate symptoms. So like working through symptoms is not a very wise idea for people with an illness. So that's one difference. And the second is that if you have a day like that where you're just not able to do anything, for me, what I found really important is that writers understand that thinking about your story is writing as well. It's so important to think about, what would this character do in this situation? What is my plot going to be? And it doesn't necessarily need to be that you're actively sitting behind a desk on a laptop or even your phone or with pen and paper. It can, I mean, how often do we say this when a writer is staring out the window, they're working? And so this is what I always say to my writers. It's like, okay, how much time when you're lying in bed and you feel really, really miserable, how much time do you spend thinking about your story? And when they say all the time, I'm like, well, there you go. You have actually been writing. You have been working on your story. And when you sit down next time and you are able, you do feel good enough to put the words down, you'll be farther ahead because you already know what needs to happen in your story. And that is something that I truly believe because I see it in myself. It's that is really a tactic that I firmly believe in.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I could see, depending on the nature of the illness, if maybe leaning into some technological help, whether that's dictating a story to let it type for you so you're not dealing with a glaring screen, or I could certainly see where maybe some of those resources might be helpful.
Yeah, I use dictation myself. And I'm really curious about technical advancements that are coming to help. There's pens you can now, directly put, you kind of write on a tablet and then instantly translate it to like typed out words. It's things like that that can help so much. And it can even just be like a simple, I write a lot on my phone. I can lie in bed and write. And that's writing too. So you just, and this is the thing with this is also why it's so hard to have this, to be a writer with chronic illness, because every day can be different and you'll need different tools. And one day I can feel great and I can do everything, and the day after I'm like, no, I can't do anything, and I'm just like just surviving. And the day after that I'm like, oh, I'm in the mood to just brainstorm a little bit. So it's so, they often say chronic illness is a full-time job in itself, and it's true, because every morning you have to kind of go, okay, so what can I do today? Like have a whole body scan, kind of going, okay, how do I feel? What can I do? And just adapt to that constantly. And it's exhausting in itself. But if you do that, you can kind of find these little moments where you're able to actually do some writing. That's kind of what I found. And yes, that can even be when you go to the loo.
Yes. So since things are unpredictable as you go from day to day, how do you manage working on, say, like whether you are setting a deadline for yourself, or perhaps you might be working under a deadline if you have to give a piece of writing to someone by a certain time? How do you manage perhaps any outer expectations that might be placed upon you?
Badly. It's very simple. Deadlines are stressful, and chronic illness and stress are like the worst combination.
I can imagine.
So this is also why I give a deadline to my writers, but I always say do as much as you can. It's not like I need you to do all of this. Do what you can. And I know that this goes kind of against some training, because you kind of want people to stay in the flow and keep going. But things are just really different for us, because we can't keep going, because this is detrimental to our well-being. So, that is one of the things. And like hard deadlines, I avoid them. I really do avoid them. And I'm just honest, like, this is how I'm feeling right now. I'm going to try to make a deadline, but it might not be able to, I might not be able to fully make it. But this is also why, the writing world is so difficult, because it does work so much with deadlines and word counts, like word count challenges and all that kind of thing it's bad when you're chronically ill, because you can never participate in that sort of thing. I love NaNoWriMo, the idea of it, but there's nowhere we can do 30 days of 1,666 words a day. There's just no way. So, it's kind of adapting those, because last year I did a whole like challenge during the month, which wasn't write that amount of words, but like think about this for today, or write a short paragraph on this today. Think of a name. It can be quite as simple as that, but it can kind of make you feel like, oh, I'm part of this thing. But it can be it's a continuous adjustment, and just really, really being aware that deadlines are bad for you. And it's one of those things that you really need to kind of grow into.
Sure.
Um,
I could see where this is where actually independent publishing and self-publishing could maybe be the writer's friend.
Absolutely.
20 years ago, maybe this is not a possibility, but with the growth of this market, now you are the one that gets to be in control of when things are published and when things are produced. And that would be a discussion for another time, but
yeah, but, oh,
certainly,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, because I even talked to writers who were like, I can't do the traditional publishing way because then I'll have to do a book tour. I'll have to promote it according to their schedule. And these are the things that we worry about,
Sure.
and that's so yeah, absolutely. Self-publishing is I mean, it's a challenge in itself because you have to do everything yourself.
Right.
So, and it takes longer. That's the thing. Everything takes longer. It's a slower process for us because we can write less, we write slower. But I always say, the turtle won the race from the hare because he went slowly.
Yeah.
So
He did what he could when he could. Yeah.
exactly. So slowly, and you'll get there. But it's also so much about, oh, I hate the word acceptance because it's this life is not great. I really wish I had full, like, complete health myself. But it is that thought of, okay, this is what it is now, and I hate it, and I'm really frustrated that this is how it is, but I'm going to do what I can right now.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the amount of deadlines that I set myself that I've missed, I'd almost say it would be 99.9%. And it really is also, again, a mental challenge to kind of go to yourself like, this is just how it is, and this is just how it is, and that is my life. This is how I deal with it, and I don't want to say it's okay, but it's just the way it is.
Yeah. I think it requires an extra sense of bravery. So kudos to you to keep doing the thing, even though I have this mental image of like pushing a rock up the hill, even though that's like what it's going to be. And but I think it's always brave for people to do their creative work, but especially so when they know that they're going to be up against extra obstacles to do it. So I know that while not being the same as the person who has the chronic illness, there are going to be writers here who are perhaps caring for people with a chronic illness, or even, as you alluded to, mothers of young children are going to have a lot of parallels to this, extra fatigue and physical wear and tear. Obviously, for them, this is a season that hopefully they will eventually grow out of, whereas with a chronic illness, you cannot be guaranteed that would be the case. But do you have any advice to offer perhaps for people who are the caregiver, if maybe their physicality will be in a better state than the person with the illness, but perhaps the time management and just the reality of like the daily unpredictability?
Yeah, I think, again, it's because this is the thing. Everyone has circumstances in life that that you can't control,
right?
And we fight so much against that because we want that control. We're desperate for control, and we all know that it's pointless and it's exhausting and it just makes us anxious and stressed out. But having said that, to accept it is easier done than but again, it comes down to that mental thing, that mental shift and the perspective that you have. And I've been ill for 20 years, so this has not been an overnight thing, let me tell you. This is just, these mental shifts for me have only happened in like the last 3 or 4 years. So it's taken me a long time to get here as well. But for me, what made a huge difference is to literally look at the things that I can do. And it can be as simple as taking a shower.
Sure.
And in the shower, think of my story. I mean, it can be as simple as that. And to really take that moment in because we so often forget that we try so hard every day to do all the things, whether you're ill or whether you're a really like tired, burnt out mum, or a caregiver of someone. It's so easy to forget in the daily life that it's actually pretty damn amazing what you're doing and what you're achieving within your circumstances. And so if you can find that minute a day where you can write, and whatever that looks like for you, you need to celebrate it. And I know that this sounds so incredibly cheesy, but it helps. It really helps, because it makes you more aware of that you're actually doing it. Because it's so easy to forget that actually yesterday you did a lot of writing because today you can't, and that's frustrating. And I found that I literally write it down when the things that I've been able to do that are like special for me that I can do. And that has been such a change for me, because it just shifts that mindset from what I can't do to what I can do. And it's not easy to do, and I still get so frustrated, every day. But it's then kind of like taking a step back and going, okay, this is not great. Today is bad, but I was able to do this, and I was able to be with my child. I was able to take care of my, elderly parent, or my brother, or my sister, or my friend. And I still, had that moment of, oh, I have a story idea. Oh, I worked on that plot hole that has been absolutely driving me crazy. And we need to really kind of take stock of moments like that, because they matter. Like, because they all can, it's step by step you get to that finish line, even if it's slow going.
Yeah.
And you wish you went faster.
It's so much easier to celebrate those things if we are doing them in the context of ourselves and not looking at the person on Twitter who has written 3,000 words today or like trying, right? The comparisonitis is awful, like just awful. Yeah. And so I love that. Celebrate the wins for yourself.
And always, remember the grass is greener on the other side. And it's really, really true. Yeah. I remember, I think it was last year, I just wasn't even around NaNoWriMo, but there was someone that I followed on Instagram, and she was doing a daily word count. And the word count was like thousands of words every day. And by the end of it, people were like, how are you doing this? And everyone in the comments was frustrated with themselves. Mm-hmm. And so by the end, she went online and she said, oh, actually, I took 2 weeks off work. My husband is taking care of the kids. I'm in a hotel. I get food delivered to my room. All I've been doing all day is write. I'm like, well, yeah. And she's like, yeah, I know not everyone can afford this.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, exactly.
Right.
So you're comparing yourself to something that is completely unrealistic for 99% of the people.
Yeah.
And that's why, you mentioned transparency. Exactly. This is why transparency is so important, because we really do feel like the grass is greener on the other side. I think, if someone is watching this and they are chronically ill and they see me talking like this here, they're like, oh my God, but I could never do that. Well, let me assure you, before this call, I was on the couch just going, oh, I feel horrible. And I'll be doing that again once the conversation is over. You know what I mean? It's so, we go by what we think we see. And so, yeah, the same goes with writing. We see the end results. We see the word counts that people want to share. We don't see the 0 word count. People are never sharing that. So, yeah, always be aware of that.
Yeah. And it's
not as sunny as it looks.
Yes. And it goes for saying that that as writers, we should also be supporting other writers in the small wins, because you never know what someone had to battle to get that small win. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time, and we will have links to all the things so that people can connect with you either through your website. You have a newsletter, and you also have a fabulous resource for writers with chronic illness, because I've seen that myself, and it's a fabulous resource. But I also know that you have a few services that are specifically for writers with chronic illness. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk about those for just a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a book coach, like you. And yeah, so I do monthly coaching of stories, sci-fi and fantasy mostly. I also do short stories now. I love short stories. And short stories are really good for people with chronic illness because they take less time. They're more easily, in our minds, easier to kind of take in as a whole. So I love helping people write short stories. And yeah, I just started doing what I've called your spoony journey sessions. They're easier to write than pronounce. And the spoonie is someone with a chronic illness. It comes from the spoon theory, which kind of describes in a very simplistic way that people with chronic illness have a certain amount of spoons to spend during the day. And yeah, those sessions are really, for people who can't afford them monthly, but still want to write, still want to find that purpose in their life, who want to feel that their voice has value, even though they live the spoony life. And yeah, in those sessions, we just talk about the struggles and, find that path out of the frustration and into hope and light.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. So writers, I encourage you to follow Sandra and subscribe to her newsletter. Even if you are not someone with a chronic illness, I think you can tell that Sandra's got a lot to say about just general self-care and mindset and things like that. But certainly if you know someone with chronic illness, who is a writer, make sure you connect them to Sandra, because she is just a tremendous resource in the writing community. So thank you, Sandra, for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah.
And writers, we will see you in another session. Bye.